In this section, I will go ahead and show how you can set up a user to be able to access the sales schema that we have created. Moving over from schemas, we can see there is an administration tab as we are logged in as a root user. From here, we can click under users and privileges, and we can see the accounts that we created when we initially set up MySQL. For example, we have the root account, and we also have an account here, Jeff, which we created, which has administration privileges. We will go ahead and add an account for Tom, our sales director at Sacula, in the event that he also has access to MySQL and would like to be able to query some of the tables directly. So we can go ahead here by clicking the add account. We have our details for account. We can select the username as Tom, and we will put in standard authentication, and we will give Tom a basic password which we can then send on to him. We don't need to set any account limits or restrictions. And we can also skip over administrative roles. But if needs be, if you wanted to create up additional administrators within your MySQL instance, you can set DBA privileges here. And selecting on each of these will grant various different permissions, which you can see if I select on each of these. Global privileges will be, default global privileges will be applied down the right. So for a DBA, all permissions are presented, whereas a DBA manager will have specific privileges. Moving over to schema privileges, we want to add an entry for the specific schema, which is going to be the sales schema. And we can select OK. And under privileges, we can say that Tom will have select, and we can go ahead and click apply. So in this instance, Tom will be able to query from our sales schema, but would not be allowed to alter any of the information, such as insert new rows or delete rows or update information. If we want to give additional privileges to Tom, such as to be able to create tables or insert or delete, we can also go ahead and add those privileges, such as create, alter, drop, insert, update, show view, and to create temporary tables. We can go ahead and click apply. To test Tom's account, we can come out of our instance here. We can select on the plus to create a new connection, and I'll call this connection name Tom. Type in Tom's username, and I'll call this Tom Test. And to connect as default to the sales schema, I'll enter in Tom's password, and we get confirmation that a connection has been made successfully. Click OK, and we now have the Tom Test connection. And we can see now that Tom has logged in, he has access to the sales tables. In addition, we may also want to grant user privileges to Tom for the Sacula database. So we can close our connection again. We need to log back in as root, so we have administration rights, and under users and privileges we can click on Tom and we can say for the Sacula database that Tom will only have select access, as this is a production area. Whereas sales, we can say, is a development area for the sales team. But as Sacula is taking information directly from our application, we would only grant select privileges in this environment. We can go ahead and click apply. And this time when we log in as Tom, we can see that Sacula is also available with the default schema as sales. Lastly, if Tom for some reason no longer required access to the MySQL database, or Tom has left the company, we can go ahead and delete the account using the delete button. We could also set as well, in addition, that the password may expire, which would force Tom to change the password the next time he logs in. This can be particularly useful when setting up accounts, that if you have granted a temporary password, that you want the user to update their password when they log in. So by clicking on expire password, logging in as Tom with my temporary password that I provided him with, I can now see that I'm forced to add in a new password. And again, this time, now that the password has changed, I'll be asked to use the new password. In addition to create, update and delete users from the MySQL interface, we can also perform the same actions using the MySQL command line or through the MySQL editor. We can go ahead and show the statements similar to the inspection that we had on our schema tables by issuing a number of commands. I can go ahead, for example, and issue the command show create user Tom, where Tom is specified in single quotes. So we could run this same command again to recreate an account for Tom if needs be. We can see that the password is encrypted. In addition, we can also look at the grants for Tom, so we can say show grants for Tom. And we can see that there are 3 grant statements. The first one is to grant usage on all of the database. Next, we have specifically granting select on Sacula. And last, we have are various select, insert and update privileges on the sales. So with each of these commands, I could run these and this would set the grant permissions. And similarly, if I wanted to revoke a permission, I can use the revoke function to remove a privilege. For example, if I wanted to revoke just the show view on, I can say revoke. And you can see there I've needed to change the to and from. And if I look again at our show grants, we can see that show view on has been removed from the statement. And lastly, if I want to remove a user, I can issue the command drop user Tom, and I can specify specifically if I wanted to delete all instances of Tom from all databases. I can use a special percentage character to denote all instances, or if specifically I wanted to specify just a given database such as localhost or a given server, or I can also specify, for example, an IP address. For now though, I can just go ahead and say drop user Tom, and we can see that drop user has been executed. And we can see that Tom has been removed from our list of accounts. That concludes this section on how to create, update, and delete users from MySQL.